Okay, to be serious, I saw your video and I wanted to post a response. I have another video that I'm getting ready to upload to I Love Ron Paul and Mendham, but I felt your video was a little bit personal, um, so I wanted to make a personal video. So, um, I think there's no one right answer. I think there are many problems, and there's no easy fix. But it doesn't mean you don't try to fix some of these things. When I was coming through school in the 70s, elementary school in the 70s, and and then junior high and high school into the 80s and 90s. Um, well, this is what I remember. One of my earliest memories in school was being brought out of a classroom and being tested. And so they brought me out of this class, and I was, I was just like, this is first grade. I was just a little, what, 6, 7 year old. And so they brought me in, tested me, and then, it was explained that, I had a reading disability and possibly dyslexic, and that they were going to put me in not a full-time special education class, but a couple of hours a day into what they called a resource class. And so they put me in this. Well, I don't know when it started, but I know for the majority until I no longer, once I reached high school, I was no longer in this resource class. So, but what I remember, actually, I was probably in the 10th grade, I believe. 10th, anyway, somewhere around that. By my senior year, I was not. But what I remember for the majority of my elementary, junior high, and part of high school years was trying to avoid being seen going in and out of this class, because if you were being seen going in and out of these classes, you were going to be tagged as not being smart. And that was the worst thing. Even at a young age, you felt that, I don't know if you want to call it peer pressure. You felt that, you can get singled out and your life would never be the same. But to be honest with you, the self-esteem problem I had from being in this class was much more damaging. I think I was much harder on myself, to where, and I know not everybody's the same, but it was to where, I thought I wasn't smart. So if I wasn't smart, what was I doing in school? Trying to learn things that obviously I wasn't being very successful. And sometimes at a young age, you feel like it's better off if you just don't try, because then you don't have the chance of failing, and you don't have that bad feeling of failing. If you just say, hey, I'm not smart, so I'm not going to try, um, you know, it's a easier thing to deal with, because you make the choice instead of the curriculum making the choice. So I say all this. I never really recovered educationally educational wise. As you see, I've never really recovered. I've never really recovered as far as, by the time I got into junior high, I had already lost, or actually by ninth grade or so, I'd already lost the building blocks to be successful in high school. I got through high school. I made it. I graduated. Um, but I guess what I'm getting at is, I realized that, you know, some of the higher maths I didn't have the building blocks to do, because I gave up at such an early age of really trying hard, at learning, because I thought I couldn't learn it. Um, and then, consequently, I figured I wasn't going to go to college. This is why I'm always, and I said this in my other video, I really think we need to focus on what people are good at and direct them in that direction, instead of saying, here's your liberal arts education, and by the way, if you do well, you can go to college and study to be a doctor or a lawyer, or you can specialize later on, but you're going to learn, you're going to learn all these, and don't get me wrong, reading is very important, maths are very important, sciences are very important, but there's a lot of stuff in between that, that are going to bore Like you were mentioning the books that you like to read. Those are, I'm sure, very interesting to a lot of people, but there's also a lot of people who find those things not, it doesn't keep their attention, you know. So, you know, eventually, once I got into high school, I realized, you know what, or even after that, I realized that, hey, you know what, my brain does work rather well. I'm not really stupid, you know, but I didn't have the skills necessary to do well in school. And the it was really funny because the telltale, you know, when people can read and they'll read a book, and sometimes in class or whatever, you know, I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this, where you're reading a paragraph, but it is just so mundane and boring to you that you read the paragraph and you got to start all the way at the beginning because you just read the words, but you didn't comprehend what that paragraph actually was saying or what meaning it was having. You were just reading it because you were told this is your assignment, you know, go do it. Um, Believe it or not, when I would read the sports section of my local team or whatever, and I'd read and I would just be into it, and I'd read, and it only took me one time to read it. I understood everything, didn't have to reread anything. That's when I knew, you know what, it's not really a reading comprehension problem. It's a not really wanting to read Shakespeare, not really wanting to read this other stuff because it just is not it's not interesting to me at the time. I'm talking about back when I was in, you know, going through grade school and stuff. But you know, like you said, there's no easy answers, and there's no really uh, simplifying, you know, the solution. But certainly we can start off by looking at other countries around the world that do systems a little differently, like Germany. And I keep bringing up Germany because I know that's what they do. They say, okay, these guys are obviously not really going to college, or they say they're not going to college, and we're going to give them a skill. You know, instead of forcing everybody, as in Mindem says, to go, how do you put it, to go to the institution or whatever, all the way through 12th grade, and you know, just giving them a liberal arts education that is really not going to help them when they get out, and they're going to be flipping hamburgers, like you said, unless they do something else. Um, which brings me to another thing. I think military should be mandatory for 2 years, like it is in other countries. That way, maybe some people who push for going to war every few years will actually think twice about it, but that's a separate subject. So, well, I think I'm running out of time, but I just wanted to throw that out there. Um, you know, that was the problem with my educational experience, was the fact that, um, you know, there's a lot of other things going on than just learning in school. Whether it's, you know, what clothes you're gonna wear, you know, you don't want to be singled out for that. A lot of peer pressures, you know, you don't want to be singled out for this. You're constantly trying to fit in, and you know, it's, as a young kid, that's really important. It's almost more important than getting an education. So that's my 2 cents.